about this, Mr. Yates. Kind of amazing with everyone on the our morning meeting. It's kind of crazy, isn't it?
It sounds like it's fun.
It is a lot of fun. These rise for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today we'll sing My Country 'Tis of Thee.
Is of thee, let freedom reign.
10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
Hey, Ms. Sculthorpe.
Hello. So I know that you mentioned it. I just wanted to remind everybody that tomorrow is tie-dye day.
All right. Without further ado, let me introduce Mr. Dave Yates. Mr. Dave Yates began his career in the trades in 1972 with F.W. Baylor. You have to see if I pronounce that correctly.
Baylor.
Which was a third-generation plumbing HVAC firm that he purchased in 1985. Besides running F.W. Baylor, writing articles for industry trade publications, and speaking at events, Mr. Yates is an experienced teacher, and he has served as an adjunct professor for the Thaddeus Stevens College of Technology. Please give Mr. Yates a warm Riverside welcome. Welcome, Mr. Yates.
Good morning, Riverside students, administrators, faculty, staff, parents, and siblings who may be on the Zoom with us today. And I'd like to take a second to recognize the Bookmer family for asking me to be here this morning. John's mother, Cynthia, and I were talking at a family reunion when she revealed that son John has dyslexia and is attending school at Riverside. I then revealed my own struggles with dyslexia, and Cynthia asked if I would be willing to visit with you to share my dyslexic adventures. Are you kidding? I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to be with you today and bring a positive message that in spite of all the challenges that dyslexia presents, you are going to be outstanding in your own life's adventures. First, I want you to let you know before I begin that my story has a happy ending, so please do not let the beginning upset you. As dyslexics, we each have, and will, face challenges. Most importantly, we, that is you and I, will meet those challenges and find creative ways not to just meet, but to beat those challenges like a bad habit. Dyslexics rock. So here's a bit of background on my travels with dyslexia. At one point, I'll be saying right, and that'll be as a question. And I need you to give me a thumbs up when that happens. Right? Right. I attended public school through 10th grade, and after 10 years of teachers telling me that I must be stupid, I had resigned myself to accepting that as fact, even though deep down inside I knew that that could not be true. The final blow was having my 10th grade history teacher hold up my test paper and say to the class, Mr. Yates has turned in the stupidest answer I have ever seen on a test. He then revealed, much to everyone's amusement, my answer for when Columbus discovered America. Now, we all know that the answer is 1492. I knew that that was the answer, and I was certain that I had written 1492 down on my test paper. But he revealed that my answer was actually 1942. Well, the class erupted in laughter. I did my best to become invisible, but that was the day that I tossed in the towel and decided I was no longer going to fight that good fight. I quit trying. My already poor grades went down the drain, along with my last bit of self-confidence, and adding salt to the wounds, I was shortly thereafter transferred to the mentally handicapped class, and the teacher, Mrs. Whitmer, bless her, sat with me one day and said, "Why are you in my class? You clearly do not belong here." Well, I had no answer for that. In fact, no one did, because no one knew what my problem was that was causing me to be there. So dropping out of school appeared to be what was going to be the best opportunity to get away from the constant failures. But I was not yet old enough to legally quit school, and that summer of 1969, while we were on a summer family vacation at the beach, my parents took me to New York City to be tested, and we met with a little old lady who lived in a brownstone, and my parents and I met with her for about an hour that first morning. Then my parents left, and I went through a whole day of testing, and then the next day we came back again, and again I went through a whole day of testing, and at the end of that day, my parents and I sat down with this woman, and she said he has dyslexia. And she recommended the Gal School in South Wales, New York, which is a school for dyslexics, just like Riverside. So my first class at Gal was English. And let me back up a little bit for that. I had to fly to Buffalo to meet with David Gal and Norm Howard. So I flew to Buffalo, took a cab to East Aurora, stayed in a hotel overnight, and the next morning I walked what had to be the longest half mile of my life to get to the Gal School down Emory Road. And the first person that I ran into was Vesta Howard, Mrs. Howard, who was just the sweetest, nice lady. She was a second mother to all of us. So she took me and introduced me to Norm Howard and David Gal, and they put me through 3 days of testing. And what they were after was to determine, number one, if I really truly had dyslexia, which I do, and number two, was my IQ high enough that there was a reasonable chance of success for me at Gal. So my parents told me that it was up to me if I was going to go to Gal or not. And so I went back home to York, PA, mulled that over for quite a while, not quite sure what I was going to do, and public school was starting back up again. So I went back to public school for 4 days and realized that my life was absolutely not going to go anywhere if I stayed in public school. And I decided I was going to go to Gal. So off I went to Gal, and the first day, the first class was English, and I walked in, and there was my arch nemesis, the textbook, the very textbook that we had had in public school. And I thought, oh my Lord, I've made a horrible mistake by coming to Gal. This is not going to end well for me. And so we sat down, and Mr. Moore was our teacher's name. And Mr. Moore, the first thing he did before class even started, we sat down, and like you, our classes were pretty small. And he grabbed that English book, slid it across the table, and dumped it right in the trash can. And he said, we're going to be learning reconstructive language, and it's the Orton Gillingham courses that you are taking as well. So I have very high hopes for your outcome. We were required to wear a coat and tie at all times, except, of course, when we were at athletics or when we were sleeping. And classes began right after breakfast, and then after lunch we had athletics from 1 until 3 o'clock. And then we were back to classes until 5:30, off to dinner, and then back to study hall from 7 till 9:30. Saturday in the morning up until noon we had classes, then in the afternoon we had athletics, and then we were bussed into town to see a movie, and we could do our laundry, which the laundromat was directly across the street from the movie theater. Back to school, and up bright and early on Sunday morning on the bus for mandatory church service, back to classes, athletics in the afternoon, study hall that night from 7 to 9:30. Wash, rinse, and repeat, and that's what our life was like at Gal. But I can say with no reservation whatsoever that Gal enabled me to turn my life around in both a personal and academic level. Now get this, our final grade at Gal was whatever grade we attained on the New York State statewide Regents examinations. So if you were taking math and you were in 10th grade or 11th grade or 12th grade, you were taking the same test that everybody that was in the same grade across the whole state took. So it was a gauge on how well you were being taught, but it was also a gauge on how well you were doing. And I'm happy to say that I got honors in every one of my New York State Regents exams. So, how about that? Going from all D's and F's in public school to all A's at Gal. How's that for a young lad with dyslexia with self-esteem issues? And you see that's the hidden side of dyslexia for a lot of us, is the low self-esteem, but I was on my way to recovery. So off to college to major in psychology with a double minor in art and geology. But midway through my second year, I decided I needed to take some time off to find myself and maybe come back to college, maybe not. And I had come to the conclusion that I did not want to spend my life as a psychologist. So I left college after that semester with a 4.0 average. And I cast about working several jobs, but I landed a job at F.W. Baylor and began to learn plumbing, heating, and air conditioning skills. And as it turned out, I really enjoyed the work. I love dealing with customers, so there's the psychology training that I had. The mental challenges and learning the technical skills and the physical dexterity required to perform the work and excel. And like most dyslexics, I was always good with my hands and adept at out-of-the-box thinking that is so natural and second nature as a matter of survival that we dyslexics learn. Bear in mind that this is one of the things that will make you an exceptional individual in your life's journey. You see, dyslexia, for all of its challenges, is truly a great gift you have that sets you apart from the general population. You are incredible problem solvers who have a natural innate ability to solve challenges that would otherwise stump traditional thinkers. But I decided to chase the American dream of having my own business, and with the support of my wife Lois, we struck off on our own in 1979. After years of growth and success, I returned to F.W. Baylor in 1985 and purchased the company. F.W. Baylor is one of the nation's oldest mechanical contracting firms that is more than 120 years old today. During my guidance, F.W. Baylor won numerous awards for our work, and I was the first ever recipient of the International Carlson Houlihan Industry Award of Excellence. I've been cited as an industry icon, one of the most influential individuals in the plumbing, heating, air conditioning trades, and as an industry luminary. Not bad for a dyslexic dude, right? Right. In 1994, I was offered an opportunity to write a monthly column for plumbing in Contractor magazine. Now imagine that, someone with dyslexia that's going to write national columns. My wife and mother generously offered to be my ghost editors to help with my grammar, which was horrible, and my spelling, which was just as bad. But nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? Right. My first column was the Christmas turkey and the drain snake, and I figured they're either going to get used to my sense of humor or I'm not going to be writing a column. But it was about a clogged kitchen sink drain on a third floor apartment, and there were kitchen sinks on the second floor and the first floor directly below. The gentleman there had been out fishing, and he had descaled his fish in the kitchen sink thinking they would just wash down the drain, but instead they had gathered together and created a clog that our machines could not bore through. So we did the next best thing. We got 2 gallons of drain snake, which is an industrial acid, and we poured that down the roof vent on the stack connected to all these kitchen sinks. Well, it didn't take long before that clog broke free. And thinking that our work was finished, we cleaned up in the apartment, gathered up all of our tools, and down the steps we were headed out the door when the lady on the first floor came flying out of her apartment, screaming and yelling at us and telling us that we had to come back in and see what we had done. So we went back into her apartment, and lo and behold, she had been thawing her Christmas turkey in her kitchen sink. And that clog from the third floor came down the stack and stopped right below where her kitchen sink connected. And that drain acid, the drain snake, came up in her sink and ate off the lower half of her turkey. So she was not at all happy. Needless to say, our bosses had to buy her a new turkey, and they weren't happy either. So it took me 3 long years to learn the rules of grammar, and spell check, of course, became a huge help. I finally got a column back from my ghost editors without a single red mark on it, so that was a big victory for me. And I quickly became one of the most popular columnists in Contractor magazine, and writing opened up incredible opportunities for me. I was able to travel not just the United States, but the world for free while teaching other contractors or covering industry trade shows for magazines. I've written for numerous publications, including the World Book Encyclopedia, and I broke the highest readership record for an article that I wrote for Fine Home Building magazine. And today I write for 3 top-rated trade publications: Plumbing and Mechanical, Plumbing Mechanical Engineer, and Supply House Times magazines. Lois and I sold the business this past December, and we retired. And I'm saying retired in quotes because 2 days later, I started a job as a consultant for Nationwide Insurance Company, and I've been retained as an expert witness in a carbon monoxide incident that took place in a middle school in Illinois. So I'm not exactly sitting around in retirement. And I also like to speak at public events, but none are more important to me than this one right here and now today, to be with you. So let me tell you, the difference between success and failure is getting back up when life knocks you down. And if I can get back up, I know you can too. So I know you will. I want to thank you for inviting me to share my adventures with you this morning. I have lived, and we continue to live, the American dream. And you will too. So we can open the floor for any questions you might have.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Yates. That's awesome. I'm sure we have a bunch of questions, Mr. Orr. I have some myself, but I want to let the kids have a first shot.
Okay.
Okay, first hand up is Abe. Abe, do you have a question?
Yes. When you said strip, do you mean comic strip? Or like a article talking about a certain thing? I couldn't hear you. My mom's making coffee in the background.
Yeah, so when tell about the writing you do. What does it mean to write a column? Like, because you have to do it, it's every month, right? You have to come up
Yes.
with a new idea, and tell about that a little bit. What is that like?
Well, it's very interesting because what they discovered early on was, well, let me just put it this way. I had all these events in my life, all these stories that were corked up in a bottle, for lack of a better term. And because of my dyslexia and my poor grammar and my bad spelling, I never wrote any of those down. But I had them all up here. So when I started to write for Contractor, it was as if somebody had uncorked this bottle. And I've got over 350,000 words that have now been published in all the columns that I've written. So it's been an incredible journey. But to answer your question, how does the process work? They want a certain number of words for your column. In right now, it's 1,100 words per column that they're looking for. And so I get to pick whatever subject I'd like to write about, whether it's about plumbing, heating, or air conditioning. And one of my favorite subjects is radiant heating. So right now we're doing what they call ebooks, where we're putting together collections of columns that I've written. The first ebook has been published. I'm busy working on the second one, and then 3 and 4 will come out later this year. So I write the column, submit it to the magazine. The editors at the magazine will look that over. If they see anything that they don't like or they want to make changes, they'll do that, but most of the time they contact me first. And the reason they do is because they made a mistake in one column early on when I wrote about a supply house, and they changed it to say that I had worked at that supply house, and a lot of people wrote in and said, "I don't remember you being there." So I wrote back to my editors and I said, "Please don't ever do that again without checking with me first." But it's really pretty simple. You know, you pick a subject. The best way I can describe it is what I call a cluster diagram. And that is, jot down on a piece of paper everything that just pops into your head. Just write it anywhere on that piece of paper. It doesn't have to be in a straight line. It can be just scattered all over the whole paper. Once you've exhausted every thought that you can think of about that subject, then you go back and you look at everything that you've jotted down, and you circle the one that's the most important. Then you put that at the top of a list. You go back and you look for the second most important item and put that on your list, and so on and so forth, until now you've fleshed out this long list, and from that you can write the article. And what that does is it organizes things. I try to keep my articles with a sense of humor so that they engage the reader, but also full of technical information so that people, I don't want to take all this knowledge with me. So I try to impart things that I've learned in the past so that contractors that are coming up through the trades can pick up that knowledge and it will help them.
That's awesome. Yeah, we have a lot of kids here at Riverside who love to write, and they're very creative. And I know a lot of them, that same method of putting their teachers will say, "Hey, put the ideas on paper," and then try to kind of web them together and connect them together. That's great rewrite. Where do you write? Do you have a special room in your house? Do you go porch? Where do you like to write?
Well, I always, when I was working, I always kept a little notepad in my pocket. And I might be driving down the road and an idea would pop into my head and I'd pull off to the side of the road and I would immediately jot down all the thoughts that came to mind about that. And then later on, when I got in front of a computer, I could write the column from those notes. I do have a home office, which is where I typically write. But sometimes if we're at the beach, I'll sit in the screened-in porch and jot down notes and write an article from there. That's one of the fun things about doing this is I can submit an article from anywhere.
Right.
So when I was flying back and forth to Atlanta with Nationwide, in my hotel room, I would sit down and write articles in the evening and then submit that to the magazines.
It's cool. Thank you. Other
You're
questions?
welcome.
Okay, next question comes from Spencer. Spencer, what's your question?
Did you have to pay for the records that you did in the ladies' apartment?
Wait, I didn't. Did you get them?
In the drain.
Can you ask that again, Spencer, about the turkey in the drain?
Mm-hmm. The records that you did when you poured the ashes down. Did you have to pay for it?
Did you have to fix everything and pay for it? Was it hard or was it just a turkey?
It was just the turkey that was damaged. The acid does not do any damage to the piping or the sinks themselves. It was pretty funny because I knew when we got back to the shop that my two bosses, Herb and Scott Baylor, were not going to be happy about what had happened. First of all, they weren't happy about how long it took. So the first question was, what took so long? So we tried to tell him, look, the guy he jammed up the drain with fish scales. We couldn't get through it. And then I said, now I have some other bad news for you. Because the gentleman that I was working with, who was actually the senior lead technician, he said, hey, it's your job to tell Herb and Scott what happened. And so I said, I have other bad news for you. I said, you're going to need to buy the first floor tenant a 15-pound turkey. They were not at all pleased with us that day.
Okay. Next question is from Sadie.
Hi, Sadie.
Hi.
Hi.
So, did your teachers really mean to you when you were in school, like the public schools?
I don't think they really meant to be mean. The problem was that they didn't understand. Very few people understood dyslexia back then, and other reading disabilities as well. So they weren't. I don't think they set out to be mean. They said things that, today I don't think teachers would say. Teachers don't go around calling students stupid any longer. At least I hope they don't. But that was, I only ever had one teacher that really kind of got it. His name was Mr. Lehman. And he asked me to stay after class one day, and he said, I don't understand why you do so well in class, but do so poorly on tests. And he almost understood, but not quite. Because, the teachers didn't have the training that your teachers today have. And you're extremely fortunate to be in a school where people, teachers, administration, faculty, and staff truly care about you and want to see you do well and succeed.
And I'll just put a 2 cents in. The Gow School is still an excellent school, very similar to Riverside, but it is for older kids.
Correct.
It is still, and it is a boarding school, correct, Mr. Yates?
That is correct. And it's now.
So that's one part. I don't know if our kids got, but when you went to Gow School, you were older. So you're what, 11, going into 11th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade.
Right. You had
to live there. You were living in a dormitory as a high school kid.
Right. Yeah, 7th through 12th grade. It was not co-ed back then, but it is now. We did not have a gymnasium back then, so we were out. All of our sports were outdoors. So we had soccer, lacrosse, and skiing. Today, it's an incredible campus. It's like a college campus with a beautiful gymnasium and brand new classroom buildings, a new dining hall. The first time I went back, I was absolutely blown away by how modern Gow is today. So it was a really enlightening experience to go back. And they had me back twice to talk to the student body, which was a lot of fun. We had a good time doing that.
Yeah, it's neat.
Okay, we have several other questions, so we'll keep plowing through them. William, you are next.
reaction, like, with your parents when they found out, like, you were dyslexic?
Yeah.
I think it was a
And,
huge.
did you feel, like shocked or, like your world kind of, like, turned upside down, like, when you figured it out?
Actually, my world had been pretty upside down for the first 10 years of public school, and I think I can pretty well.
I know, like, I mean, like, upside down, like your world,
In a good-
like your life changed after.
Oh my word, yeah, my life did change dramatically, and I think to answer your question, I think both my parents and myself were tremendously relieved to actually know what the problem was, because prior to that we didn't have any idea. We just knew things weren't right. So that's one of the incredible frustrations of having dyslexia but not being properly diagnosed. So I'm not kidding when I say that when I went to Gal, it literally turned my life around. And I would not be the success that I am today had I not gone there and received proper training through the Orton Gillingham courses that we took.
And do you know the name of the woman who tested you in New York City?
No, and I wish I did. I'm sure she's long gone from this earth because she was very elderly at that time. In fact, she was pretty scary to me as a young lad. You know, this elderly woman that answered the door and kind of looked a little bit like the Wicked Witch of the West. Her hallways were very dimly lit, so it was dark and kind of foreboding. But I ended up in the dining room at this huge table, and it was natural light came in from a wall of glass. But she actually turned out to be a very nice lady, and you know, really, she's the reason she had literally saved my life.
That's neat. We have a lot of our teachers who are trained in Orton Gillingham. They can trace their teacher who was their teacher, and they can trace up to the Orton Gillingham, to the original one. So I was wondering if you knew the name because we know a lot of those names here and talk about them.
Yeah, I wish I did. I don't.
It's neat.
Okay, next question comes from Liam. Liam, what's your question?
Hey, Liam.
My question is what was it like to be at a hotel by yourself?
It was pretty.
Yeah, and that was because you went there on your own, correct?
Yes.
You had to spend the night in the hotel as a kid, and you had to walk that half mile to school, right?
Right. Yeah, it was. I'll tell you, honest God's truth, it was frightening. I was a scared kid, not knowing what to expect. I knew that the gal school was somewhere down that road. So I was walking down the road, and finally I saw the sign for the gal school, and I thought, okay, now I know where I'm going. And then I got to the school, and there was no clear indication of which building I should go to. So I was kind of standing out just off the roadway on the edge of their property when Mrs. Howard saw me. And boy, she really put my fears at rest almost immediately. She just had that warm type of personality that it's kind of like a new old friend that you meet for the first time, and you immediately have a sense that they've got your back. So that really put me at ease. But yeah, to answer your question, I was very intimidated by the whole process. But so many bad things had happened as a result of having dyslexia that, I figured, what's to lose? How bad could it be compared to all the terrible things that had happened during public school in regards to academics? So yeah, I was scared.
Took a lot of courage, though, to overcome that fear. We talk about that here at Riverside, how courage isn't not being scared. It's being able to overcome your fear.
Right. It's also known as being stubborn.
Okay, 2 more questions.
All right.
So we'll go with Kate next, and then we'll have one special one at the end.
Hey, Kate.
Kate? Nope. She wasn't unmuted. Let me see. Kate, here you go. Sorry, you're up.
We hear you.
Okay. Did you say you worked at a school in Illinois?
No, I didn't work at the school in Illinois. There was a carbon monoxide incident that took place in a middle school in Illinois. And if you don't know what carbon monoxide is, it's a byproduct of combustion that's actually very deadly. And what your red blood cells will absorb the carbon monoxide in place of oxygen. In fact, they prefer it. It's like a kid in a candy store. So it can be very deadly. Now, in this case, it was not. It was caught early enough on that some of the students got headaches, but nobody got permanently injured. And the school administrator, bless her, reacted immediately and evacuated the school. So the problem is that a lawyer came into town and set up a shop, and he recruited people to sue everybody. And in Illinois, there's no statute of limitations if children are involved. So everybody who's ever worked on that building is being sued. So I'm serving as an expert witness to get to the truth of what took place. And because of my experience in the trades and my experience with carbon monoxide and having testified in other, as an expert witness in several other jury trials, I was recruited by the law firm that represents the school. So I'll be going out there for a jury trial sometime later this year or early the following year, depending on what happens with this virus. But at any rate, it's been a long process for them. This incident actually happened in 2014, so it's 6 years ago, and it's just now winding up to a court case.
Wow. Okay, and then our last question, we have time for one more, and it's going to come from someone you might recognize.
Uh-oh.
John.
Hey, John.
Hey, John. Hey, how you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good to see you.
When did you start working in the trades?
1972. So I'm as old as dirt.
So was college hard for you? Would you say, how was college for you after Gal? Was it, I know you had a 4.0, so was it as hard as like the public school had been, or was it easier since you had the OG training?
It was a lot easier than public school, and entirely due to the training that I'd received at Gal. And where's Henry? I didn't see Henry.
He's
come here,
over here.
He doesn't like cameras as much.
So Dave is our cousin. I'm just gonna put this plug out there. He's John's daddy's cousin, and John is named after Mr. Dave's dad, John Yates.
Yep.
Cool.
John Yates Bookman.
John Yates Bookman, named after Dave's dad, John.
Yeah, Cynthia is responsible for me being here today because the weird thing is we're at this family reunion, and of all the things to have happen is for Cynthia and I to have a conversation, and she's revealed that John has dyslexia and is going to Riverside, and she had no idea that I had dyslexia until I revealed that to her, and then she immediately said, "You've got to come down and talk with us." And I said, "Well, I'd love to." And of course, then this stupid virus kicked up, and the March 18th date that we had scheduled previously went away. So I'm delighted to be here today.
Well, I'll tell you, Mr. Yates, we are delighted that you came to speak with us, and I am formally inviting you, when this virus is done with, I want you to please come to Richmond and visit Riverside. We'd like to have you here and tour you around, and you can see our kids when we're in regular classrooms, and we'd love to have you speak again. So,
Yep.
Riverside, please join me in thanking Mr. Yates.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are we going